Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Costa Rica Real Talk, 2Costa Rica Real Estate's podcast on all things real estate and Costa Rica. And we're joined once again by Scotter, managing broker of 2Costa Rica Real Estate. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing great. Nice to be up in the city, a little cool breeze.
Yeah, well, today is kind of like sunny, which is not hasn't been the case the last couple of days. So you brought kind of like the Kepo spirit here to the city, which is very nice of you.
Yeah, it's usually a rainy season. So far at the coast, it's been a really nice rainy season. There's been more rain up here in the Central Valley, I think. So glad to bring a little sunshine up here.
Yeah, thankfully. And we're doing like kind of like a series on like the 20 years of 2Costa Rica Real Estate. 20 years, which sounds very impressive. And the first podcast, or the first kind of wave of content, we wanted to focus on like that initial advent of 2Costa Rica Real Estate within like the scene here in Costa Rica. And perhaps to start the podcast, I want to ask you more about like before that, like your perception living like in Colorado or in Alabama, like of what Costa Rica exactly was.
You know, I'd love to say that we had a really clear vision of what Costa Rica was. I had graduated college and all of my friends were starting kind of their careers in cities and, starting the rest of their lives. And I just felt I wasn't inspired by what everyone around me was doing. And we had the opportunity to come down to Costa Rica on what we thought was going to be, we knew it wasn't just a vacation, but we thought it was going to be maybe 6-8 weeks, a couple months. Todd was on his summer break from his junior year of university. I had just graduated, and we came down on what we thought would be an exploratory adventure. We'd heard, rumors of Costa Rica and the beauty and how magical a country it was. And we came down without really a destination in mind or a goal in mind. And we got to San Jose, stayed at the Holiday Inn on the first night and rented a car and went up to the Pacific coast the next day up to Playas del Coco and fell in love. Like with every town we got to. We're going to live in Playas del Coco. And then they said, maybe we should check out another town. And we fell in love every town we went to and went up and down the coast. And it became a place as Todd was getting ready to go back to university and kind of go back to his college career. And we just saw so much opportunity and so much magic here. And I will tell you, the beginnings were pretty humble, Alonzo. I worked in a coffee shop in Manuel Antonio called Cafe Milagro on a student visa that I had gotten to give me some work permits. I worked on a sport fishing boat trying to do some of their tech stuff and answer emails. And at the very beginning, we had visions of what the future might be, but we really kind of came and just fell in love with the lifestyle and the warmth of the people. And the irony is, we still talk a lot about what keeps us here. And it's really the same thing that captured our hearts and minds when we first got here 29 years ago. It's been for me almost, which was a country where just the feeling that you get and the sense of the people and the peaceful nature and this Pura Vida, which has gotten, as it gets busier and busier here, Pura Vida can start to sound like a cliche. But it's really not a cliche. It's something that Costa Ricans really hold, close to heart. We came imagining a really beautiful, tropical, amazing country. But what really kind of captured us and kept us here, because we came pretty naive and blind, to be perfectly honest. I'd love to say that we came with this grand vision, and that wasn't the case. We came to a beautiful place that had a mystique about it, and we came to kind of discover it. And I don't want to use a bad medical term, but it was almost infectious. It was something that we came here, that feeling we got was so strong that, we decided to stay and kind of carve out myself and a friend of mine that was down here with us decided to stay and carve out a future. And Todd went back to finish college and he basically suffered through his senior year with the goal of getting back here as soon as he could.
And to me, that's even more endearing when you think about it. Like nowadays, it's very difficult to have that perhaps like sense of wonder of a destination, not only Costa Rica, but like in the world, with like the degree of information that's available and like how everything is marketed. But like in this moment in time, that the fact that you came here with a clear plan and just like the place itself kind of created like a lure that you couldn't escape. It sounds more magical even.
It might be, but I also think that to a certain extent, we're in an information age where you can know everything and see everything and all the information's always there at your fingertips. And I think we do so much travel where there isn't an allure. I think that some of Europe still gets that. You feel that old world charm. You still marvel at some of the big things that you can go and see there. But a lot of like vacation destinations you go to, you get there and it's sterile. You go to the big resort, you sit by the big pool, people take the 75 selfies to get the one that makes it look perfect, but there isn't magic. There's just, I'm not working and I'm in a beautiful tropical place. And one of the things that I think Costa Rica still has going for it is that while it's not an undiscovered gem and there isn't that mystique of arrival, there is something that's still less tangible that I think is Costa Rica's biggest asset. And I think that in a world that over the last 25 years or 29 years I've been here has gotten more tense and more conflictive and more polarized, I think one of the things that keeps people coming back here and has investors wanting to live here is that intangible of, this is beautiful, but I feel something different here than when I go to other beautiful places. And that's one of the things I tell my clients is Costa Rica doesn't have a monopoly on beauty. It is certainly a beautiful place. Nicaragua's beautiful. Panama's beautiful. The Caribbean's beautiful. Hawaii. There's a lot of really magical natural beauty out in the world. And Costa Rica is certainly among the top places, but it doesn't have a monopoly on beauty. But I do think it has a quasi-monopoly or a very unique capital in this sixth sense, the sense of being that people get here. And when I talk to my clients and when I talk to locals and I advise people on investing, I say, trust that sixth sense. If you go to a place and you're only buying because of the X's and O's and black and white and the condo and the amenities, you're probably missing the point. But you're right, it is a magical part about Costa Rica, and it's a really magical part about our history here.
And now that you mentioned like the X's and O's, that's also very interesting because as we talked previously on our podcast, from what I hear from agents and talking with like everyone around here, like that lifestyle element perhaps is like the most central part of like selling Costa Rica in a way. Like you can do like the return on investment, which are important parts of like the process. But at the end of the day, like as you mentioned, like the intangible, like the aura of a place. And Costa Rica also has like that very distinctive thing. Like I don't know that many destinations have. Like within this like small area of a country, you also have like very different experiences you can have. All very beautiful, all very like within the realm of this like tropical paradise. But you go to like Guanacaste and the North Pacific, and then you have like very different experiences to the Central Pacific and a very different experience to the South Pacific. So you can basically like have this scale of how much like uncharted appeal you want, how much like ultra luxury you want, which I think makes it very unique, right?
Certainly. And we've seen that's probably, when you talk about this 20-year run of 2Costa Rica, our run here, the changes that parts of Costa Rica have seen, the DNA stays the same. But, Guanacaste is seen obviously in an acceleration of tourism and hospitality development, infrastructure and mega projects like no other part of Costa Rica. And the southern zone of Costa Rica, I don't want to say it's been forgotten, but it is still very much seeped in that same, mystique of 25 years ago. And yes, it's seen development and yes, it's more discovered. But I think that there's some obviously geographic and temperature and just geographic kind of differences between the pampas of the cattle country and coastal parts of Guanacaste and the dense rainforest of the southern zone versus the high plateau. But in the last couple of decades, we've also just seen really massive cultural maturation. San Jose, the lifestyle in San Jose has become a lot more cosmopolitan over the past 20 to 30 years. International brands and art and culture and music. I think we talked on the last podcast, Todd and I, one of our first businesses here before 2Costa Rica started, we had a concert company. We did one concert, but it was because we missed live music, and that was a big part of our lifestyle in Colorado, and we missed it, so we said, we'll just bring it here. It was a fun time. Now there's 4 concerts every weekend, major superstars, art, food, dining, all of those things have become really international here. Guanacaste's seen big corporate development, and that's one of the things that we're more and more focused on. We've always been guiding our clients towards the real estate's the easy part. If you work with a good professional, the 4 walls, the condo, the house, that becomes the easy part. If you do the hard part first, which is make sure Costa Rica's for you, and then pick the flavor of the country, pick the flavor of the ice cream, if you want to call it, first. because that's where the magic happens. The reality is 2-3 years after purchasing, people rarely go, oh my God, I love my bathroom. So amazing. Or wow, my kitchen. They talk about their lifestyle. They talk about their community. They talk about their integration into it. And it doesn't mean to say the real estate things don't matter, but they're easy if you pick the right area first.
And that immersion within the local lifestyle, even before you had like 2Costa Rica Real Estate as a brand, let's say, to me that's also like very distinctive, because as you mentioned, you already had like this experience doing like different miscellaneous like jobs here, then eventually doing like the concert project. And I think you also mentioned at one time you did like kind of like a vacation project as well. How was that process of like working within like different realms of the service industry like 25 years ago and eventually landing like on real estate?
I think we didn't do it with the idea of getting into real estate. But, we had a travel company, Allure Surf Tours, and 2Costa Rica Vacation Travel. I worked in the hotel industry, sport fishing industry. I worked in hospitality, managing a luxury hotel in Manuel Antonio, and even food and beverage in a couple of different environments. And Todd and I both had a lot of experience just interacting with people coming to discover Costa Rica for the first time. So working in all of those different hospitality realms gave us two really key insights. One is, what do people feel? What do people expect? What are people's fears? What are people's memorable moments when they come to visit? But it also gave us the opportunity where we worked a lot on a lot of different logistical levels with local people, local governments, local permitting, employees at all different levels and all different educational backgrounds, and really learned to have an appreciation for both of those worlds. And it's not so much this consumer-employee relationship. So we learned to build really rich bonds in our local communities with local governments, but just more with local people and understanding and respecting their fears. It's funny because when you're dealing with a tourist coming or an investor coming, a lot of our job as a real estate company now is to educate them and clear up concerns or misconceptions or fears about what it's going to be like to invest here, whether they're legal, cultural, operational, even health, medicine, etc. One of the things that we also, I think, do a really good job of, and is one of the reasons I think it's an important part of our success and integration, is we do a really good job, or we hope to do a really good job, of also working with local communities, working with our friends and neighbors to address their fears about a foreign invasion, about loss of identity, about are we losing the Costa Rica of old because we're moving towards a new Costa Rica? And I think understanding the cultural fears and the growing pains that Costa Rica and Costa Rican communities face when looking to attract investment, when looking to attract development, and being sensitive to that really makes us good guides, because we can help Americans understand on how they can integrate. That's a common question. I think we talked on the last podcast or one about how are foreigners treated. And I go, some are treated horribly. And it's probably because they bring the worst of the world here. But most are really embraced with open arms because they're coming here because they don't want to live in Europe or in the United States or Canada. They want to have a piece of something different that's more than just the real estate and the view, but is that ethereal sixth sense element. And I think that our background in all of these different industries really gave us a lot of good real life experience in having the ability to understand and bridge those gaps between old and new, between foreign and local. And I think that's a really rich tool for both of us.
Yeah, because particularly like the early 2000s, like late 90s as well, was kind of like this initial like uptick in terms of like Costa Rica's worldwide branding, like as a destination. So also along the way, I guess, like came some external speculation, as we've seen like talk about like in the 2008 crash and everything that happened around those times. But also like what were kind of like the challenges of being like this, like being essentially like trailblazers in what you were doing, particularly like as a non-branded, like small, like real estate company?
Wow, a lot there, and a lot of different challenges and a lot of different opportunities. I'm big on analogies. People that work in my office and my clients deal with it. I do a lot of sports analogies. I try to take sometimes complex issues and draw parallels. And one of the parallels I always draw with a lot of my clients and my team is I compare Costa Rica's development to my role as a father. And from the late 80s, early 90s when the first real tourism started. There was certainly tourism before that, but where any real palpable tourism numbers started here. It was very much like having a young kid. Growth spurts, where out of control growth, very raw, amazing, powerful times of change, but things go so fast. It seems like an eternity, but it also goes in a blink of an eye, much like raising a child does. And there's really great things that take place. There's really amazing parts of it. And there's growing pains, and things happen really fast and happen really slow at all the same time. Costa Rica, for Todd and I, kind of watching this all take place as a boutique firm. One is we had the opportunity to probably either purchase or franchise almost every real estate company that came to Costa Rica one time or the other. And we always approached it with a really kind of scientific, let's just look at what they provide versus what we provide. And because of our experience before we started, we've been living and working here for a pretty good amount of time before we opened up real estate. And we kept looking back at what they provided was international recognition. They provided something that people were familiar with. And to get that, we had to give up a lot. It means that we were going to be affiliated with anyone that could buy a franchise. We were going to be affiliated with people that maybe didn't cut their teeth the way we did. They were going to be affiliated with people that could buy legitimacy and buy a brand name versus people that earned a brand name. And, when we talk about the origins of 2Costa Rica, Todd and I worked very hard to not work together. We were best friends and we were brothers. We also knew we wanted to have some kind of Chinese wall because we're brothers before anything. And we spent a lot of our first years here, him doing his business, me doing my business ventures, and spending every night on the phone talking about some of the challenges, obstacles, frustrations with partners, with business dealings. And we kept condensing our lives every afternoon into, God, I wish I had somebody kind of like you, without ever manifesting that directly. And then 2Costa Rica was really born out of some unique life changes for both of us. Our wives becoming pregnant with our first daughters, who are both 20 years old this year. Some windfalls financially, business sales, a business that he built, me building my first spec home, and us looking at, there's a real opportunity here to do something with people that I know and trust and respect, people that I know are going to put integrity first in front of speed of development, how fast you can grow. Should we buy a brand? You mentioned some boom and bust times in like 2008. It was hard for us, doing things the right way, guiding people macro to micro, going through a process when you're watching a new gringo that just landed here 3 months ago sell $6 million in condos when he can't speak the language, doesn't know contracts, doesn't know law. It was hard. It felt a little bit like that tortoise and hare kind of book when you read your kids when you're little, where are we missing something by not buying a brand? Are we missing something by not racing to the finish line? And we made some strategic decisions to stay independent and kind of keep our autonomy, just believing that in the long run, bringing our tools together and bringing this authenticity to the process was going to benefit us long term. And it's one of those things, kind of like a tortoise and the hare novel, where we feel like now those decisions that really cost us money in the boom days of maybe right around 2000 and 2007 to 2009, or 2000 to 2007, those decisions to remain patient really are paying dividends now with our growth and organic and the brand we've built, because it's trusted, not because it's a brand. It's trusted because it earned it.
Yeah, now going back to the use of analogies, actually, it's kind of like when we're like in the start of like NFL season, and there's like this talk about boom or bust with players and like the high peaks and low valleys. But like, at the end of the day, what you look for, like in any sense, is all like consistency. Like it isn't like the sexiest play you can make, but at the end of the day, you know what you're getting, and you're getting like value for what you're putting into it. So
I'm going to interrupt. The only thing I didn't like about that whole analogy is you just said that we're not the sexiest of the bunch. So now I thought you were going to tell us we're going to be like the Tom Brady of real estate in Costa Rica, but you're right.
Well, actually, you could take the analogy and you see what. Well, I don't want to talk about football here, but the Patriot way of the Tom Brady and that dynasty was built on like kind of like a good defense, run the football, like the nuts and bolts of how you do like something. So I guess there might be like some Tom Brady in you.
You got it. I appreciate you throwing me the bone, but in all seriousness, I just believe, and I think Todd and I believe, that Costa Rica is not a place that goes light speed. We don't have financing. Development here doesn't go as fast as the States. And one of the things that we do is we slow down our buyers and investors to buy for the right reasons. And it's been nice. One of the things that a lot of my agents talk about is when the 2000 to 2007 boom, people came with the expectation of doubling their money. And the reality was, if you weren't doubling your money every year or two, you were probably greedy or dumb. It was that good, but that's not real world. That's not how markets work. And so when you go into a post kind of meltdown 2007, 2000 or correction, it ended up being nice for us because anyone that could only sell in a double your market world doesn't deserve to be guiding people to investments here. That's not reality. And for us, I think one of the areas where our company really got strong was in the aftermath after a big market slowdown, where people that got in said, yeah, the guy said I could sell for double my money. And we said, well, what investment in the world can you double your money on all the time? And you shouldn't have trusted that blindly. That's when our approach and our agent's ability to tell clients, you can make money here. There is appreciation, or the market is going northward, but it takes place at a very palpable rate in most cases. And we started to be able to sell to people for the long-term, right reason, personal use. And then we fold investment and we approach investment as part of that. And we have some clients that are strictly investment driven. And we say, okay, let's take the heartstrings out of it. But for the vast majority of our coastal investors, it's a combination of investment, lifestyle, wealth reallocation, legacy plays. And the slowdown actually allowed our approach of kind of being really deliberate and honest and helping people measure all of these things really started to resonate more. So it's, again, one of those things where we felt like we were missing something oftentimes watching a guy that just bought an international franchise for $35,000 selling real estate off his website with no real history here. But those people are almost without fail out of the game now. And our commitment to kind of do things slow and steady and to our own kind of credo of how you want to do business has started to really pay dividends in the last 10 years, which is nice.
Yeah, and also talking about like the differences like from 20 years ago to now, actually I think like from my perspective, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the whole industry has kind of like changed in a way, like towards like doing it like the right way, kind of like a professionalism of like the industry in a broader sense, like going through official means, like the whole idea that Todd talks about, like the Wild West of like the late 90s basically is gone. So in a way it kind of like readjusted itself and kind of like favored like the 2Costa Rica approach.
I think so. And I won't take all credit for changing the way business was done in Costa Rica, but I think two things have happened. I think values increasing, the amount of investments taking place here forces the real estate environment to become a more professional environment because it's not play money anymore. This is a place there's still global value for sure. Costa Rica has a huge growth potential ahead of it when it's compared to other world-class kind of vacation destinations, but it's also not the 1990 pricing where you can come down and buy something for nothing. I think that the lack of real estate licensing, the lack of structure and reglement, the Wild West that allowed, it's slowly moving off. And the lack of regulation, the lack of licensing certainly means there are still people out there. I have transactions happening now where I have buyers that are working with me now that have worked with multiple agents and have had multiple deals fall apart. Not because they didn't love the property, just because they were misled. They had agents that were deal hungry instead of guiding people on. So they were scared of pointing out defects. They had agents that were scared of talking about the difficult elements of and problem solving, et cetera. And so there's still some mediocrity out there, I think, in the real estate world. It's why we don't have 250 or 300 agents. We're picky about who we allow to represent the brand and make sure that they're good, honest guides before anything. The country sells itself. We don't think of ourselves, and we try not to think of our sales team as salespeople, but as guides to clients. But you are right. We've seen, when I moved here and started in real estate, collaboration between brokerage was non-existent. Everyone sold their properties. Most of Costa Rica was a for sale by owner. Sellers would say, I've got a property for sale. I'll pay any realtor this commission if you find a buyer, which is crazy because it meant that sellers didn't have any representation in transactions. Really in the past, 5 to 7 years, we've seen a massive move in that where informally, we don't have an MLS yet in Costa Rica, although there are some really good efforts now to create some MLSs that are gaining traction, which will be a wonderful tool for us. But in lieu of that, a growing group of good professionals around Costa Rica through WhatsApp, through Facebook groups, through email chains are starting to share those listings and create a scenario where all realtors understand that our job is to try to represent our sellers and buyers and find the best properties through them instead of just selling. It's just one example of how I think the business environment for real estate has really matured. Some of that's government driven. We are SUHEF regulated. There's now some rules and restrictions on who can actually exercise as a real estate agent, which is a great thing for Costa Rica. I also think that the lack of financing and the fact that we've been through some boom and bust markets has kind of carved out people that think that you're going to come here as a real estate agent and make easy money. It's a hard business and you got to work hard and you got to bring integrity to it, and not being in those double your money kind of crazy on fire markets helps because you don't get people chasing money coming into real estate because they'll find quickly that you can make a sale. You can get lucky here and there, but if you're going to make a career out of it, you won't get rich unless you bring a pretty rich background. So I think that we are in a maturing industry. I think when you compare it to the United States and Canada and Europe, we still have a great deal of maturation left to do. But I think in a lot of ways, the development of the real estate industry here, Alonzo, is similar to Costa Rica in general. There's a lot of our infrastructure. There's a lot of banking and efficiency and bureaucracy things that are all in that growing pain stage where it's not done growing. It's not done maturing, but it's made massive strides for the betterment of the way tourists feel, the way the country's developed, the way we protect our environmental assets. And it's not perfect, but it's a lot better and a lot more mature than it's been. And I think it's all done with good reason, which is everyone understands what a jewel of a place we have to live. And if it was a Wild West like it was in the early 90s or late 90s in this environment, they could quickly destroy a lot of things, not just a community or not just a real estate or a piece of jungle or a piece of beachfront, but that I'll always bring the conversation about that essence of why Costa Rica is so special and that good vibe that you get here. And I think most of the steps the country's taking and professionals in real estate and other businesses are taking are there to protect that. And it's a good thing.
And I wanted to ask you also about like that process. You kind of like hinted at that earlier about like expanding like the community of 2Costa Rica. You talk about like now you got like tens of agents like all around like the country, different offices. Mm-hmm. Like how was that process, particularly like starting like when you first set the company? Did you ever think about like how it will like reach out?
It's crazy. We started the company was myself, Todd, and Scott Williams, who's been with us since I was in my living room with my newborn baby, trying to see how we were going to do this. And I got to commend Scott Williams, who had the vision to come with us on this journey and is kind of a part of our family now. Probably the hardest thing for Todd and I, and then Scott Williams is our kind of lead broker, to do was to find and bring new people on that we could trust to work. We started with a very pure vision of what we wanted this to be. And it was a reaction to what we'd seen in the industry. So I'd worked in some real estate. Todd had some very high-end clients from his travel business that had got into real estate. And there was a rejection of this. Our clients and ourselves aren't feeling right about the way business was being done. So we were born out of a kind of a rejection of the current model and some of the experiences that we and our clients had with other real estate firms. And so we became really purists in the way we wanted to do stuff. And the first time you allow somebody to come and try to represent you with that very tight network, brothers, and then Scott Williams, who's like a brother to me, on how we want to handle clients and how we're going to treat clients and how we're going to walk people through that is a scary thing. It's, I don't want to give it an equation like giving your brand new car to somebody, because it was more important than that. It was like, here's a part of us. And now we're going to empower a third party to represent that part of who we are to the world. And we were very trepidatious. I think we could have grown a lot faster if it weren't for our own fear and fear in a bad sense, and then pride in a good sense of this is too pure to screw up with a speedy development plan. And I'm both proud and ashamed of the fact that it took us so long to get to where we are, because once we made the commitment, and I really got to commend Todd on this, I've been so busy in Manuel Antonio and projects there, he really made a commitment to where we both started to look at how can we start working on our business instead of working in our business all the time. And we were still very hands-on brokers. Anyone that knows our company and any of our agents will tell you how involved we are sometimes in even the minutia of their deals. But we started to dedicate a lot more of our time to look at how can we work on our business. And as we began, we never really did recruitment, but as we began to open the doors for our agents to talk to their friends, to people they know, or to people that might be interested, we were really kind of amazed and humbled that the feedback that we got from people that wanted to come and be a part of our brand, either as agents or as franchisees, when they began to see how we worked, when they began to see the tools that we committed to give to them, rather than saying, this is great, it's a lateral move from this brand to this brand, and that's nice, and it's a fresh start for us. People were overwhelmed. You know, agents that had 10 years in the business working with that were successful agents with very well-known brands, international and local, were getting on the phone with Todd and I going, every realtor in the country, there's somebody that has something bad to say about them. And one of the common things we get from a lot of our agents is, and even our competitors, is that nobody has anything bad to say about 2Costa Rica. Which in a cutthroat real estate world really speaks a lot about how hard Todd and I have worked on just integrity and doing things the right way. We don't go look to poach other people's agents. We're not looking to go and grow just to grow. It's about people that want to be a part of this brand and share kind of a credos. And we've been really overwhelmed and humbled by the way our own agents have helped to recruit and to bring people in who want to come and work for us, not because it's the fastest way to get rich, but because they understand and have experienced other real estate offices and really crave support and a community of learning where they can become better people, become better parts of their community, and earn money doing it in real estate.
And finally, to round out the podcast, I want to ask something that I think we haven't actually addressed, and perhaps it's like a common question you get, like, how did you decide on the name?
How do we decide on the name? You know, two brothers, a play on words, come to Costa Rica. You know, now that we go to real estate conferences around the world, I'd love to tell you there's a genius that the alphanumeric start always puts us at the top of every roster list, but we weren't that smart, you know. And so, you know, Todd and I were dreamers at the Coast, and his first business had a unique name. So my business had unique names, and we wanted to have something that kind of reflect the essence of where it started, which was the two of us. And we also thought that, you know, coming to Costa Rica, the play on words was a fun one. And now, you know, the name, it's really just amazing for us. Now we built a brand, you know, when we go around now and it was 2Costa Rica Real Estate. But now when you say 2Costa Rica, anywhere, you go to any law firm, you go to any professional around Costa Rica and you say 2Costa Rica, it's really neat for us to know that people think about the Cutter Brothers and they think about our great team. And it's really amazing for us to think about how our agents want to be a part of that brand and legacy. And one of the really cool things is watching, you know, our offices in Guanacaste and in Tamarindo, where Todd and I are a little bit further away physically, and seeing them become the face of our brand. So that, you know, our vision and goal is that it's not, when you think 2Costa Rica, you think Todd and Scott. Our hope is, and our goal is, and we're starting to see it manifest, and when people see 2Costa Rica, they think of a kind of professional. They think of a kind of person. They think of a kind of agent that's integrated into the community and is bringing new investors and helping foster the growth of the community, but also is fiercely protective of the authenticity of the community and people that were there before we were there. And we're starting to see that now. And it's really cool that, you know, when you go to Tamarindo and you talk about 2Costa Rica, people think about Alex and Andy and Alejandro and Jorge. They don't think about Scott and Todd, but they think about our agents there with the same esteem that they think about Todd and Scott. And when you talk about 2Costa Rica and Dominical, they think about Matt and Gene and Scott and Catherine. And the same thing's true in ACO with Steve and with Maria. That's really the magic now, is that the brand that kind of started as the Cutter Brothers is becoming 2Costa Rica with its own personality in each community, but all kind of weaved with the same cloth, which is really special to watch.
Yeah, I actually asked that because I think I don't want to get too technical, but like usually when reading about marketing, like the best thing like that can happen to a brand name is when it becomes like post-semantic. That means that the meaning of the word itself isn't what people get; it's like the values associated with that wording. So I guess that's kind of what's happening with Costa Rica.
If we're that blessed, it'll be one of the proudest things that I can talk about doing the past 30 years besides raising my kids.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast again, Scott, and sharing the valuable history of like 2Costa Rica real estate.
Thanks. I look forward to sharing more of it soon. Take care.
And if you enjoyed the conversation, you can follow us on social media at 2Costa Rica Real Estate, and also follow all our previous episodes on your favorite streaming platform at 2Costa Rica Real Talk.